It's just a continuum of who I am, really.
What else can Kendrick even say? I'm not convinced that he will reply.
I've always stayed to myself. I've always been in my own bubble, whether it's with the fam or whether it's training.
And from my eyes and from most of our eyes, there's not really much more Kendrick can do to really push him more down in the ground.
How I process it all is just, I continue to do what I was doing 10 years ago.
And it's not going to affect Drake at all anyways.
Kendrick Lamar just watched Drake drop 3 albums in one night, plant his flag on the CN Tower in Toronto like some kind of comic book villain, and spend nearly every bar on Iceman pointing directly at K-Dot's chin.
Here's every time Drake responded to Kendrick Lamar's disses on Iceman.
The hype machine jokes, the streaming numbers, the conscious rap image, the Compton turkey giveaways, the bot farm allegations. Drake put all of it on wax and aimed it at one man. And Kendrick hasn't said a single word back. No post, no story, no cryptic bar dropped at 2 a.m. to let the culture know he heard it. Just silence.
Yeah.
And I think from that perspective, Drake's fans are like MAGAs at this point.
Complete, total, deliberate silence. And that silence is the most dangerous thing happening in hip-hop right now. Because the last time Drake came out swinging and Kendrick went cold and still, what came back didn't just win the beef, it rewrote the rule book on what a rap war could even look like. Kendrick let Drake and Cole say everything they wanted to say, and then he came back with Euphoria, Meet the Grams, and Not Like Us stacked on each other like 3 rounds to the body, and by the time it was over, Aubrey Graham had gone from the undisputed king of this generation to the punchline of every culture conversation for the foreseeable future.
Drake is responding to Euphoria will make them know, but he also uses Make Them Remember to answer once again to Euphoria.
So when I tell you that every single person paying attention to real hip-hop is locked in right now, I need you to genuinely understand the magnitude of what we are watching unfold. Drake dropped Iceman on May 15th, 2026. He had been building toward this moment for 2 full years. 2 years of watching court cases get thrown out. 2 years of sitting ringside while Kendrick collected 5 Grammys for a diss track that had his government name in it. 2 years of watching Kendrick Lamar perform Not Like Us at the Super Bowl halftime show in front of 120 million people, while an entire stadium full of people screamed certified pedophile back at the cameras loud enough to rattle the broadcast.
I don't know what more else he can do to not like beat it into the ground, like the same thing.
2 years of having his legacy discussed in past tense by the same blogs and culture voices that used to crown him untouchable. So when Drake finally stepped back out, the whole industry leaned in. People genuinely believed this was the moment. This was Drake digging deep, finding that hunger, reminding everybody why he dominated this game for 15 straight years. And then the album dropped, and Drake spent the entire project still talking about Kendrick Lamar, still talking about Kendrick. That one detail tells you more about the current state of this beef than any bar analysis ever could. So today, we are breaking down every angle. Every shot Drake threw on Iceman that had K-Dot's name written on it, every frame he came from, and most importantly, what Kendrick's actual response to all of this looks like right now. Because here's what most people are sleeping on. The response already happened. You just didn't clock it for what it was. We're going to get into all of that. But to really understand why Iceman lands the way it does, you cannot start in 2024. You have to go back further, way further. We're talking 2011, fam. That was the era when Drake and Kendrick were genuinely brothers in this thing. Kendrick Lamar, Compton kid, fresh off the XXL freshman cover, still largely unknown outside of the West Coast. And Drake, already a certified chart-dominating star, put Kendrick on Take Care. Not as a feature alongside him, but as a full solo interlude on one of the biggest albums of that year. A track called Buried Alive Interlude. That was real love. That was Drake using his platform to introduce a young homie to the world. For the next 2 years, these were peers moving in parallel. 2 of the most gifted artists of their generation, building their legacies, no friction between them. But 2013 changed everything, and this is the root of the whole thing.
I've always stayed to myself. I've always been in my own bubble, whether it's with the fam or whether it's training. How I process it all is just, I continue to do what I was doing 10 years ago, and that's like, be better in myself, better in the craft, and not looking.
Kendrick got on Big Sean's control and called out Drake by name as someone he was gunning for lyrically. He framed it as competition, not personal. But Drake never fully received it that way. The temperature shifted after that. And for the next decade, every time Drake was asked about Kendrick publicly, he'd say the love was still there. But the subliminals in the actual music always told a different story. The tension never left. It just stayed below the surface, simmering. Then 2023 happened. Cole and Drake dropped First Person Shooter. When Cole threw Kendrick's name into that Big Three conversation, a lot of people thought it was a compliment. Equal footing. Three kings on the same throne, hip-hop royalty, unified front. The internet celebrated it like a coronation. What nobody read in that moment was Kendrick Lamar's face, because Kendrick wasn't honored. Kendrick was insulted. Not Like Us was the moment the temperature hit full boil, but none of that happens without understanding every single step that led up to it, because this wasn't random, none of it was. March 2024, Kendrick lands on Future and Metro Boomin's joint project, and he drops Like That. And he walks directly up to the Big Three framing and stomps it out like a cigarette on pavement. No metaphors, no coded language. He says it flat. It ain't a Big Three, it's just Big Me. One sentence. The match was lit, the fuse was burning, and most people still didn't grasp what was actually happening. Because here's what everyone got wrong in that moment. The culture read it as competition. As a proud rapper defending his spot, talking his talk, reminding people where he ranked, what it actually was a declaration of war. Not a beef, not a back and forth for clout and streams. Kendrick had already decided before that record even dropped that he was going to dismantle somebody's legacy permanently. In broad daylight, in front of the entire culture. He wasn't looking to win a round. He was looking to close a chapter. Drake responded the way Drake responds. April 2024, he drops Push-Ups. He comes at Kendrick's height, questions his pen, does his usual Drake thing, snide, dismissive, a little too comfortable. Then he escalates and drops Tailor-Made Freestyle. And this is where Drake made a mistake so bad, it actually foreshadowed everything that came after. He used AI-generated voices of Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg to take shots at Kendrick. The Tupac estate responded immediately and threatened legal action. Their message, paraphrased, was clear. Using Tupac's voice as a weapon against Kendrick Lamar, an artist who had spent his entire career honoring Tupac's legacy, made the disrespect exponentially worse. Drake had to pull the song down before the real war even started. Before the first real punch was thrown, he had already committed an unforced error that you simply cannot walk back. That's not a good sign. April 30th, 2024. Kendrick drops Euphoria. 6 minutes and 13 seconds with no hook, no melody, no attempt to make it radio friendly, just bars. Kendrick went after Drake's identity, the culture vulture image, the performance of blackness from a mixed kid out of Toronto who built an empire selling that performance back to mainstream audiences. He went after Drake's entire artistic persona. The internet collapsed. Timelines went dark for hours. But Kendrick was nowhere near finished. May 3rd, 2024, 6:16 in LA lands. Another missile. Kendrick was rolling, momentum fully built, and Drake had no choice but to come back hard. That same day, Drake drops Family Matters. 11 minutes. He goes at Kendrick's personal life, accuses him of domestic abuse, claims that Kendrick's creative partner Dave Free had actually fathered one of Kendrick's children. Drake came at everything, the credibility, the image, the household. If those allegations had landed and stuck, we're talking about a career-ending record. Drake had calculated that kind of damage and deployed it. 20 minutes later, Kendrick dropped Meet the Grams. 20 minutes. Kendrick had already written his response before Family Matters even hit streaming. He saw every punch coming. And the most chilling part of Meet the Grams isn't the accusations, it's who it's addressed to. Not Drake, Drake's parents. Written like a letter to his family, laying out accusations of sex trafficking and raising the existence of a second secret child that Drake had allegedly been hiding from the public. Pusha T had already exposed the first secret son Adonis back in 2018, and then Kendrick was telling the world there was another one buried deeper. Then May 4th arrived and Not Like Us detonated. Certified lover boy, certified pedophile. You already know the line, but the full song was the real weapon. 4 minutes over a DJ Mustard beat so infectious, that people who hadn't followed a single bar of this beef were streaming it on repeat. It had a chant. It had a melody. It had festival energy baked right into its DNA. Drake had spent years positioning himself as the most commercially dominant rapper alive. The crossover architect, the pop machine, the man who turned street music into top 40, and Kendrick obliterated him on that exact terrain. He made a diss track more fun, more quotable, more radio-friendly, and more culturally undeniable than anything Drake had put out that entire season. That wasn't an accident. That was surgical. Drake tried one more time. May 5th, 2024, The Heart Part 6. He denied every accusation. He claimed his team had fed Kendrick false information specifically to expose him. The Heart Part 6 was supposed to sound like a mastermind move. The claim was that his team had deliberately fed Kendrick false intel about a second secret child, planted the information like a trap, and that Kendrick walked right into it. On paper, that sounds like a power play. In reality, it sounded like a man trying to reframe a defeat as a chess move. The internet debated it for maybe 2 days. Then Kendrick walked out at the Pop-Out, his own show, at the Kia Forum in Compton, and performed Not Like Us 6 consecutive times in one night. Not twice. Not 3 times as an encore. 6 times. LeBron James was sitting in that arena. The entire city of Los Angeles was breathing that record like oxygen. Every single repeat performance was louder than the last. That wasn't a concert moment. That was a coronation. You cannot manufacture that kind of energy with PR strategy and planted misinformation stories. That was a city declaring a winner out loud. Drake lost. Full stop. The streets rendered that verdict in real time, the culture confirmed it, and then, and this is where it got historic, the music industry's most prestigious institution put a bow on it. At the 67th Annual Grammy Awards in February 2025, Not Like Us didn't just show up. It didn't just win something token, it went 5 for 5. Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song, Best Music Video. Every single category it was nominated in, it took home. A diss track, a direct named accusatory diss track about a living, breathing artist swept the Grammys like it was a classic album from a legend at the peak of their powers. A diss track won Song of the Year at the Grammy Awards. Let that sit with you for a moment, because that has never happened before in the history of that institution, and the subject of that diss track had to watch all of it happen. Then 2 weeks after the Grammys, Kendrick Lamar stood on the Super Bowl halftime stage at Super Bowl 59. The single largest audience a musical performance can reach on this planet, and perform Not Like Us in front of the world. The crowd screamed the certified pedophile lyrics so ferociously that it bled through the broadcast censorship and landed in living rooms across America. Serena Williams, a woman Drake had been publicly linked to romantically, was literally on that stage as a dancer. Every single element of that night was a message, and the message was delivered without a single ambiguous word. One journalist from Complex put it plainly: what Kendrick Lamar did to Drake on that national and global stage is arguably the largest, most documented public loss any rapper has ever absorbed in the history of hip-hop beef. Not one of the biggest, potentially the biggest, ever. That is the wreckage Drake was climbing out of when he eventually came back with Iceman. Between that Super Bowl moment in February 2025 and the Iceman drop in May 2026, Drake largely stayed off the battlefield lyrically. He put out a collaborative project with Party Next Door on Valentine's Day 2025, some sexy songs for you, but that wasn't a war response. That was Drake retreating into comfort. Then a freestyle called the Fighting Irish Freestyle leaked in January 2025, where he addressed the beef and seemed to take aim at LeBron, but the energy was flat. Hip Hop DX called it empty tough talk. The culture didn't move. Nobody picked it back up and ran with it. What Drake did next told you everything about his actual headspace. In January 2025, he filed a defamation lawsuit, not against Kendrick Lamar, against Universal Music Group, his own label. The argument was that UMG had knowingly promoted a song that falsely branded him a pedophile. That label's CEO, Lucian Grange, had publicly celebrated a Grammy win for a track that defamed his own signed artist, and that the whole campaign was a pressure mechanism tied to contract leverage behind the scenes. He wasn't going after the man who wrote the bars, he was going after the machine that amplified them. That lawsuit got dismissed in October 2025. Drake is still appealing it, but the scoreboard reads 0 for 1. So walking into 2026, Drake had one real option left. Drop undeniable music. Remind the world who he was before this whole war started. That was the mission Iceman was built for, and the rollout was genuinely large. He ran a 4-episode YouTube live stream series building anticipation. By episode 4, he was previewing actual lyrics, and in a moment that immediately went viral, he appeared to burn down what looked like a bot farm on camera, referencing allegations that Not Like Us had benefited from artificially inflated streaming numbers. He teased bars that the internet decoded as direct shots at Kendrick within hours of the stream ending. Then he dropped the announcement that nobody saw coming. Not one album, 3 albums, simultaneously, at midnight. 43 songs total. Iceman, Maid of Honor, and Habibti. He lit up the CN Tower in Toronto and made the whole release a citywide event. And before the albums even officially hit streaming, a leaked track called 1 AM in Albany surfaced, a continuation of his timestamp series, where Drake went directly at Kendrick's height, compared him to Muggsy Bogues, took shots at LeBron James, and came for Dr. Dre full wartime energy. Drake was back in the streets talking to everyone who still had ears for him. Now, before we even get to whether the bars landed, let's just acknowledge what Drake was actually attempting to do across all 43 songs. Because this wasn't just a diss campaign. This was a full demolition project. Multiple songs, multiple angles, every shot calculated to hit a different pressure point. Drake wasn't throwing haymakers, he was doing surgery. And you need to see every cut laid out clearly to understand what his actual strategy was. First shot, make them pay. Drake goes straight for the jugular on the streaming narrative he's been building since the lawsuit. The magician line, questioning how 100 million streams apparently evaporated once the legal heat died down and the moment faded. That wasn't just petty wordplay. That was Drake trying to plant a grenade under Kendrick's victory lap. He's not attacking the music directly here. He's attacking the legitimacy of the win. He's whispering into the culture's ear, what if the scoreboard was rigged? What if what you thought was a knockout was just smoke and mirrors? And then he doubles down on the same track with the direct callback to Kendrick's Like That line, the big 3 is just big me energy, essentially saying, all right, you claim the throne out loud, now come outside and defend it like a man. Second shot, dust. And this one is where Drake gets petty in the way only Drake can. He's basically telling Kendrick that outside of the beef, nobody was quoting his bars, nobody was running back his albums. The diss tracks are all that put him in the conversation, and even then, the body of work doesn't hold weight. Now, we all know how this lands when you realize Drake said this as a man who just lost a Grammy to one of those very diss tracks he's dismissing. The room heard that irony immediately. Drake said it anyway. That alone tells you something about the headspace he was in. Third shot, the height jokes. And look, if you followed this beef at all, you know Drake cannot let this go. Muggsy Bogues, famously the shortest player in NBA history, dunked for once, even I'm amazed, give the kid a raise. He's calling Kendrick small and acting genuinely surprised that someone K-Dot's stature even landed a clean shot. The thing is, Drake already ran this same play on push-ups back in 2024. He went to the height well then. He's back at the same well 2 years later, pulling the same bucket. When a man keeps returning to the same insult, that's not confidence, that's obsession. The culture clocked that too. Fourth shot, and this is the most surgical one Drake threw in this entire campaign. During episode 4 of his live stream, he previewed a bar that cut straight at Kendrick's identity. White kids listen to you because they feel some guilt, and that's how your soul gets fulfilled. Handing out turkeys on camera inside your hood, then going back to the hills. Let that sit. Drake is going after the entire foundation of what Kendrick is. The conscious rapper, the Compton voice, the community figure. He's saying the fan base is guilty white liberals, not the black community Kendrick claims to represent, and that the charity moments are optics, not love. That is a precision strike aimed directly at Kendrick's credibility. But here's where it collapses on itself, because Drake, a mixed-race Canadian rapper who spent his early career performing black Southern culture back to itself, is now policing someone else's demographics. The internet didn't let that breathe for 5 seconds. You cannot be the certified culture vulture of your generation and then stand up and question somebody else's authenticity metrics. That math doesn't work, fam. It just doesn't. Fifth shot, the caged owl rebuttal. Kendrick put a caged owl in the Not Like Us video. Everybody saw it. Everybody understood it. Drake responds by rapping that the owl never sees the cage, that the owl only rises to seize the day. He's trying to reclaim his own symbol, flip the visual narrative, turn defeat back into dominance. It's clever in theory, but in execution, all it does is drag your audience back to that video, back to that imagery, back to everything Kendrick already did with it. So when you hear B's on the table and Drake says he's fighting the man, not suing a rapper, what he's doing is trying to reframe the lawsuit narrative. Because a lot of people in the culture looked at Drake going after UMG instead of taking it directly to Kendrick and called it what it looked like: a side door exit, a legal workaround dressed up as a power move. Drake is pushing back on that read, telling you he's going after the institution, targeting the machine behind the music, not the artist holding the mic. Whether that argument lands with you or not depends on what you believe about his actual motivations, but he felt the need to address it, which tells you the criticism cut. Then you get the West Coast material on Too Hard for the Radio, and this is where Drake reveals exactly how calculated this whole rollout is. He's rapping over a beat with West Coast DNA in its bones, and then he's turning to Kendrick and telling him that people in Oakland love Drake too. That's not a casual lyric. That's a targeted strike on Kendrick's geographic foundation, his cultural home base, the roots that give his whole brand its authenticity. Drake is trying to chip away at the regional loyalty that makes Kendrick who he is to the people who raised him. And then he goes directly at Mustard, the man who produced Not Like Us, the man who turned that record into an anthem that echoed out of every car, every cookout, every corner from Inglewood to the internet. Drake's line is surgical. Says Mustard hasn't had a hit since the Drake era, since the YG collaboration days. He's not just taking a shot at Kendrick. He's trying to discredit the architect of the record that buried him. That's how you know the wound goes deep. You don't attack the producer unless the record they made genuinely haunts you. Now we've laid out the full picture. Every shot Drake took across every project against Kendrick Lamar. And the question the culture won't stop debating, from DJ academics to Joe Budden to every barbershop conversation happening right now from Compton to Toronto, is simple. Did any of it work? Here's what the consensus is building toward. Technically, Drake rapped. The Iceman material is sharper than what we've heard from him in years. The bars are tighter, the delivery has edge, he sounds like a man with something to prove. As a pure rap performance, it's a strong showing. Nobody credible is saying otherwise. But here's what people keep missing. This battlefield was never just about who could construct the better verse. It's about narrative control. And the narrative right now is so deeply in Kendrick's corner that even well-executed bars can't fully reverse the gravitational pull of what already happened. Drake drops 43 songs and a massive portion of his central album is still consumed by Kendrick Lamar. By the streams that disappeared, by the bot's accusation, by the lawsuit, by the owl, by GNX, by the West Coast, by the image war he lost publicly and in real time. Every single one of those references points back to a fight that the streets already scored. And here's the detail that says everything. When you win, you don't keep bringing up the fight. When you're still bleeding from it, you can't stop. Kendrick hasn't posted, hasn't responded, hasn't acknowledged Iceman in any official capacity. Before the album dropped, the Not Like Us and Luther videos briefly vanished from YouTube, gone for a few hours, then back, and the internet absolutely lost its mind trying to decode the meaning. Then the fireman rumors started spreading. People were genuinely convinced Kendrick was loading a counter project, that the response was locked and coming. The hype was real until the whole thing got debunked as a fabricated hoax. But pay attention to what that moment actually revealed. A rumor with zero confirmed basis went viral across the entire culture because people's anticipation for Kendrick to respond is so electric that they started manufacturing the response themselves before it existed. That's not Drake's power. That's Kendrick's. That's leverage. That's what it looks like when you hold all the cards and you haven't even reached into your hand yet. Kendrick said nothing and still had Drake's entire operation watching the horizon, waiting, wondering when the counter move lands. And now, here's what people keep sleeping on. Here's the layer of this situation that gets consistently overlooked when people frame it as a simple diss track competition waiting for the next round. Kendrick Lamar responding to Iceman with a diss record would not be a power move. It would actually cost him something. Because think about what this man has done since the dust settled. 5 Grammys, a Super Bowl halftime performance that the whole world watched, GNX, an album that didn't need to mention Drake's name once to remind everyone exactly where the power sits. And that's exactly the frequency Kendrick has been moving on ever since. While Drake was busy with the lawsuits, the live streams, and the album teasers that never seemed to materialize into anything permanent, Kendrick was out in the world, selling out arenas night after night, putting on performances that reminded the culture exactly who they came to see. That's not a coincidence. That's a strategy. That's a man who understood that the most powerful thing he could do after winning a war wasn't reload. It was move forward, like the war never defined him in the first place. That's what makes this so devastating for Drake's entire narrative right now, because the Iceman needs Kendrick engaged. Think about what Drake actually needs to happen for any of this to work. He needs Kendrick to respond, to acknowledge, to step back into the ring, because if Kendrick fires back, the beef is live again. Drake gets another round. Drake gets to stand in the same conversation as K. Dot one more time. But if Kendrick says nothing, Drake is standing in an empty arena yelling into the rafters. He's the guy throwing punches at someone who already caught a flight, collected the trophy, and went platinum. Look at the actual receipts since the dust settled. Not Like Us became one of the most streamed rap records in Spotify history. GNX debuted at #1 without needing to use Drake's name as a marketing tool. The tour sold out venue after venue across multiple continents. The Grammys gave him 5 awards in a single night. The Super Bowl gave him the biggest stage in American entertainment. The culture didn't just give Kendrick a participation ribbon, it handed him every single metric of validation that exists simultaneously. Commercial, critical, and institutional, all at once, all in one wave. That's not just winning a beef, that's ascending to a level where the beef becomes irrelevant to the story, and then Iceman drops. Drake's big statement, his reclamation project, his attempt to rewrite the last chapter, and what is the biggest conversation coming out of that album? It's still about Kendrick, not about Drake's new era, not about his artistry, not about where he's headed. The dominant talking point off Drake's own album release is still circling back to what Kendrick did to him. That is not controlling the narrative. That is the narrative controlling you. Let me be straight with y'all right now because this needs to be said clearly. Drake is talented. That is not up for debate on this channel. The catalog from Take Care Through Nothing was the same through If You're Reading This Through Views. That's a generational run. Top 10 albums of an era. Undeniable. And even on Iceman, there are moments where you hear that version of Drake, the one who was untouchable, the one who made it look effortless. Those moments are real. But here's the part the culture is sitting with and nobody wants to say out loud. Every single bar Drake aimed at Kendrick on this album already has an answer, and Kendrick didn't even have to record a response to provide it. The line about nobody asking about your raps got answered by 5 Grammys before Drake even laid it down. The question of cultural impact got answered by 120 million people watching Kendrick perform on the Super Bowl halftime stage. The GNX album answered whether Kendrick could move past the beef and still create at an elite level. The world tour is answering in real time whether people are buying what this man is selling. You cannot diss facts with bars. That is genuinely not how this works. So when Drake says 100 million streams vanished without question, the actual answer already exists in the public record. When he says he doesn't remember a single word of Kendrick's raps, the response is that over 100 million people watch those raps perform live on the largest entertainment platform this country produces every year. The receipts don't need a rebuttal track. The receipts are just sitting there. So here's where this gets real. If Kendrick actually responds to Iceman, if he drops something that directly addresses Drake's shots, 2 things happen immediately. First, the beef continues on Drake's terms, and Iceman gets retroactive relevance it does not currently have on its own merit. Second, Kendrick now has to clear a bar that he himself built. Not Like Us exists. Euphoria exists. Meet the Grams exists. That level of surgical destruction is the standard now. Anything that doesn't reach that height gets framed as regression, as falling off, as proof that the first run was lightning he can't bottle twice. He set that bar himself, and the culture will hold him to it without mercy. And that's exactly the trap Drake is counting on. Because if Kendrick doesn't respond, Drake gets to spin the silence. But here's what Drake has to sit with if Kendrick never says a word. His most anticipated project in years, the one his whole camp was hyping as the return, the reset, the proof that he was still that guy, generated less genuine cultural weight than a rumor, a fabricated album title, The Fireman, something that doesn't exist, something nobody made, something with 0 actual music attached to it, got more internet momentum than half the real Iceman track list. Let that sink in for a second. because that is genuinely damning. And here's my read on what's actually happening right now. Kendrick's response is already in motion, just not in the format Drake is hoping for. There's no diss track coming tomorrow. There's no countdown, no leaks, no studio footage. The response is the silence itself. The response is Kendrick not even turning his head in Drake's direction while Drake references him 17 different ways across an entire album rollout. While Drake is name-dropping and nudging and leaving breadcrumbs for blogs to analyze, Kendrick is on tour or in the studio doing the exact thing he announced from the biggest stage in the world when he performed at the Super Bowl, moving the culture forward. That's what he said. That's what he's doing. And that contrast is doing more damage to Drake's narrative than any verse ever could. The last time Kendrick addressed any of this publicly was on waxed out murals from GNX. And even then, it wasn't personal. It wasn't petty. He wasn't talking about Drake the man, he was talking about what the beef revealed about the industry, about his own legacy, about where he stands in history and what this whole era actually meant. That is the posture of somebody who already closed the file, already moved on, already decided this chapter is finished. Drake just sent another letter to a man who canceled his subscription. That's the real story underneath all of this. One artist is still fighting for the last word. The other already decided he didn't need it. And the longer that silence holds, the more the culture reads it as the final verdict. Not a pause, not a delay, but a full stop. The streets understand what that means, even if the blogs won't say it. The conversation isn't over, but for one of these men, it might already be lost. If you're tired of the watered-down takes and want the real story behind what's happening in the culture, stick with BarzBuzz. We don't do PR, we don't do spin, just the truth the industry doesn't want trending. Subscribe and make sure you're notified. The next one drops sooner than you think.